Hello and welcome everybody to the Dana webinar. AOD Nurses, Are We an Endangered Species? Before we commence, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm hosting this webinar from the lands of the Bundjalung Nation. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work today and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this webinar. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of Australia. Okay, the Management Committee of Dana, and I would like to really thank you for attending this vitally important webinar, which endeavours to provide an extensive analysis of the Commission Dana research, State of the Workforce 2020, mapping the alcohol and other drugs nursing workforce in Australia and New Zealand. Dana for many years, as many state departments also were searching information for, about the alcohol and other drugs nursing workforce. Who are we? Where do we work? Are we in public, private, both? How old are we? What experience do we have? And many other aspects. As the past president, I saw the gathering of this information as vitally important and was keen for Dana to proceed as the peak alcohol and other drugs nursing body in Australasia, as the findings would be fundamental in the design and delivery of the work that Dana could provide. The State of the Workforce research was able to answer all these questions and many, many more. You've all been muted at this present moment to reduce noise and disruptions during the webinars. I'm sure many of you have done many webinars recently. If you want to ask a question, please access the Q&A section that you're able to see to ask questions. And following the presentation, these questions will be put to Adam. Being mindful, we probably won't be able to answer all of them. However, we'll do the best we can. Professor Margaret Hamilton, AO, was Dana's first patron since 2013, actually. She's been an influential and noteworthy asset to this organisation. Margaret understands the critical importance of an experienced and well-trained alcohol and other drugs workforce to the delivery of quality care and service provision, but furthermore about the pivotal role played by the nursing workforce view and the delivery of essential healthcare to the population of people that often receive suboptimal care. Without us, where would our patients be? So let me introduce you to Professor Margaret Hamilton. Margaret Hamilton, AO, has had over 45 years experience in the AOD field, including clinical work, education, training, research, publication and policy development. Professor Hamilton was the founding director of Turning Point, chair of the Multiple and Complex Needs Panel in Victoria, and an executive member of Australian National Council on Drugs. She is also a life governor of the Alcohol and Drug Foundation in Australia, patron of Dana, and is a member of APSAD. She is an active member of the Victorian Mental Health Tribunal and continues as an honorary professor in the School of Population and Global Health at the University of Melbourne. Professor Hamilton was recently the chair of the review panel of the medically supervised injecting room in Victoria. She also holds an honorary position at the University of Melbourne and says that she is retired but remains active. Let me now hand over to Professor Margaret Hamilton's live recording. Thank you.
Hello everyone on Thursday. I'm sorry that I can't join you. I have been listed for some time for carpal tunnel surgery, and I got notice just a couple of days ago that it's scheduled for Thursday. Having reassured Colleen that I was fine for Thursday, it's now important and necessary for me to pre-record this as best I can from home. Firstly, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners who have cared for over many centuries the land that has kept me sane over the last 9 months. I also want to acknowledge South Australian members and participants of Dana and to this seminar and forum, since I know as a Melburnian what it is like to be going through your own experience of anxiety, uncertainty, confusion, distrust, distress, and need for just hanging in there. We wish you well. My own perspective as I participate today is that I have the honour and the privilege of being invited to become Dana's first patron in 2013. I fortunately was joined last year in 2019 by another patron and a nurse this time, Tanina Harvey. So welcome, Tanina, and I'm sorry that I can't be participating directly today. And I say that especially since I am not a nurse. My background is in social work, in psychology, in public health. I have worked for many years in the alcohol and drug sector, initially in late 1969, and really ever since then, one way or another, as a clinician, as a teacher, as a lecturer, as a researcher, a program developer, policy advocate, policy developer, advisor at various levels and across various organisations. And so it is with that perspective that I congratulate Dana on this report that I have the privilege of launching today, a report on the drug and alcohol nursing sector workforce at 2020. From the research that was done in 2018, predominantly, and I'm impressed with the way that research was done. A mix of the literature review, consideration and screening and looking at advertisements for nurses with alcohol and drug emphasis across a long period. Especially impressed that this is both Australia and New Zealand that have been included. The survey that was done, and then I think about 40 interviews to ensure that there was a good qualitative understanding of those quantitative survey results. The report is presented very clearly, helps me that it has graphics, it has pie charts, it has graphs, it has maps of Australia which show that there are people who identify as primarily alcohol and drug or drug and alcohol nurses right across the territory that has been surveyed. So across all jurisdictions and across New Zealand. Of course, there are fewer in regional and remote locations, and obviously the survey has very few people from those locations who were able to participate. But it is nevertheless an impressive, comprehensive, thorough, scientific report of good research. Well done, Dana. In launching this report, I have read much of the full report, but I admit not every word of it. I have read every word of the executive summary, and I understand both will be available on the Dana website. I found the report a reminder of many things and a prompt for a call to action in its own way. So I just want to make a few comments along the way, not summarise the whole report. The executive summary does that very well, quite briefly and very clearly. I want to just highlight the few points in the findings and recommendations that stood out for me. One of them is that these nurses across these countries are highly qualified, very experienced, and endangered. Endangered because of the age profile. There are many more in older age groups than there are among the young. And one of the challenges arising from this report is how might we encourage and attract young nurses to join our specialist sector in the range of roles that are now available, not just as inpatient or community-based workers, though that's the predominant one, but even as policy developers and advocates, researchers, and across the practice arenas, both inpatient, outpatient and community, There are many other opportunities, not just in health, increasingly also in justice, in family and communities, family and childcare. Aged services are increasingly needing people with alcohol in particular and drug expertise. So this is an arena of a group of professionals who have much to offer, who are perhaps underutilised and not sufficiently visible to those who are employing people, where we need this sort of expertise that nurses can bring. One of the factors that is raised about the complexity of our sector is the increasing complexity of the clients, consumers or patients, and the need, therefore, increasingly to have nurses fulfilling many of the roles. The mix of medical complexities and complications with mental health ones, with social complexities, together with drug and alcohol use, is increasing in my view, and this report tends to support that. We need nurses in these roles, and there are many opportunities as we move from where I started some many years ago, 50, let's say, when the advice we were giving people as workers with people with very high alcohol use, then called alcoholics, was that you could drink up to 10 drinks a day and be safe, but anything over that was excessive. Can you believe that? That was the advice, and I've still got some old notes of mine in the orientation to my first job in what was then called the Alcoholism Clinic at St Vincent's Hospital, Melbourne, that the number of drinks someone could have would be 10 a day, but no more. So hasn't that changed? But now we even have depot medications for some of the substitute pharmacotherapies. We have a range of physical illnesses and complexities around hepatitis, for example, and other things that we have not had earlier experience of, and the late stage complications of some of the drugs that our consumers or clients or patients have been using. This all increases the importance of having someone who is well across the clinical, medical, scientific, nursing context of knowledge and the skill and capacity and willingness to respond. And speaking of willingness, one of the issues raised in the report is the stigma that seems to stick to some degree to the workers in this sector. I've always been very aware of that as a worker in this sector. And there's many sociological texts written about the way in which we tend to take on the stigma associated with the client population that we work with. All the more reason for us to be clear, to be steady in our knowledge and our skill, and to be willing to advocate and be engaged in policy as well as in practice. What I think of as preparedness is one of these factors. And I look to the undergraduate curricula of nurses, but also of those that I have taught, social work, psychology, medical students and dental students, as well as town planners and a few others. And what I note is how difficult it is to get alcohol and drug curriculum into the undergraduate arena. I'm very aware that this report makes a point about the importance of having more AOD content in the undergraduate years. My experience, particularly of lecturing to medical students, is that it is so important that we take every opportunity to excite, to energise, to encourage puzzlement and to encourage inquiry and to encourage reflection among students in relation to alcohol and other drug use. We need to understand that every student, in my experience, has an intrinsic interest in the content and the knowledge of alcohol and drugs, either because they are users themselves, or they know someone who is, or they've watched people who are. And I think in that context, it's not that hard to excite their interest. I found it was better to start on the drugs that most people use, and I often used caffeine to intrigue, to stimulate, to connect dependency or psychoactive effect, and then psychoactive drugs, to the issues around everybody in the lecture theatre or in the classroom. So I think we need to be imaginative and inspire, encourage, and get hold of these young people when they're students in various arenas, and especially nursing. It's also important to take every opportunity. If we're asked to give a lecture, to have a go at imagining it in our own sense, in the way that I've just described, for example, but also to try and see if we can't get on the exam paper. There's nothing like developing up an exam question and having that in sample exams for students to actually study up on AOD. And lecturers or teachers in the arena will usually welcome a good exam question, particularly if it has model answers available. I've found that most helpful, and case studies. And what I called, when I was the curriculum coordinator for alcohol and drugs for medical students for some years, I called it curriculum infiltration. I used to challenge the students with facts from scientific literature. I still recall in one of my lectures saying that I understood that alcohol consumption was one of the factors contributing, although a smallish percentage, to the explanation of breast cancer. I invited them to take that piece of information to their pathology lecturers. They came back and said, the path lecturer said that's not true. So I then met the path lecturer, gave them the articles I'd been reading, and they shifted and changed their lectures on alcohol's contribution to a range of cancers. That's just a little example. Among the recommendations is the importance of engaging nurses in policy, which I've talked about, encouraging and attracting young ones, and I think Adam is going to talk more about how we might go about attracting more people into the alcohol and drug sector. The importance of inclusion in undergraduate years and the opportunities that now exist for alcohol and drug trained nurses who often are more specialised than many others to contribute to a range of areas in healthcare. It's an exciting time. There's much to do. And so I'm so pleased to have the opportunity to launch this report this year. And in doing so, I will just say a word about the things I've noticed about nurses, working with many over many years. I've always found them to be good-humoured and willing to have a go. Willingness is one of the most critical ingredients of being a useful professional. And nurses, in my experience, have usually been number one. As they have been as team players, I've never met a nurse in a context I've worked in who wasn't able to and willing to participate with others, other professionals, other people, and with other clients and consumers, and give things a go together. But most importantly, what nurses bring to this sector is their professionalism, their humour, their care, their science, their understanding, and their art. This is an important profession. Let's try and grow it. Let's try and ensure that it goes further. Let's try and make nurses the key professional in alcohol and drug services and infiltrated across a range of other services and opportunities in the community. I wish you well, Dana, with this report. Well done and go well. Bye.
Thank you, Professor Hamilton, for your heartfelt, concise and relevant highlight of the contemporary concerns, I think, facing
Hello and welcome to the Amplifying Scientific Innovation podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sophia Onoye, founder and CEO of...
Okay, we always love a little bit of a glitch, don't we? Getting back to that, as I said, just thanking Professor Hamilton for that lovely presentation there. Moving on, please allow me to introduce Dr. Adam Serby. Adam is a registered nurse who has worked across mental health, community and AOD nursing. He's currently a lecturer at Deakin University in Melbourne and has research interests in AOD nursing workforce development and drug and alcohol use in older adults. Adam is the current president of DANA. Over to you, Adam.
Thanks, Darren. Apologies for the glitch. That was mine. You'd think after 6 months in lockdown in Melbourne, I'd be all over Zoom, but apparently not. At least it wasn't the dreaded "you're still on mute" that we all get to hear. It's a real honour to be able to actually launch this report, given that we had planned to do it in August at our conference in Adelaide. And I'll probably just second what Professor Hamilton said. Our thoughts go out to those of you in Adelaide who are in South Australia who are just going into a lockdown that we've experienced in Melbourne. We all know what it's like, and has been effective, but it's certainly been tough. So our thoughts are with you. And I just want to start with a short animation. Really, that's the crux of our research project right there in that animation, this idea that we're highly qualified, highly experienced and endangered. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. But first of all, I just wanted to say that this has been a fairly large project, as you'll see when you download the report, which will be available after this webinar. And it really didn't happen without the participation of the drug and alcohol nurses of DANA and the non-DANA members as well, who actually chipped in, participated by taking the survey, doing an interview, giving up their time. Most of them were about half an hour in length. So as you can imagine, it's a decent commitment to actually lend your voice to the project and also promoting the project. So we take our hat off to all the people who did that. It's been really important. And probably the biggest reason why this project has been such a success was the drug and alcohol nurses out there. Should also acknowledge our research assistant, Diana Burr, who lots of you that have participated, all of you that have participated spoke to, who did a fantastic job. Can I just say on the smell of an oily rag in terms of research assistant salaries. So she was fantastic and an asset to the project. But really what I wanted to start with, and it's great that Darren has introduced this because this was the conversation I had early in DANA with Darren, and this was the comment that he made. We don't really know our workforce. We're at a DANA planning weekend in Brisbane. I can remember it, it was stinking hot and humid. It's a big thunderstorm rolling in. And we were talking about our workforce, and this is what it came down to. We didn't really know our workforce. We didn't know a lot about them. Interesting time to say that, because I always think of this picture, and I know there's a few Melburnians in the audience who know where this is. This is our medically supervised injecting room that opened a couple of years ago, North Richmond Community Health. But to me, this is really a good picture of where drug and alcohol nursing in Australia is at the moment. I know we've had one in Sydney for many years, successful trial reports from their facility, but opening this in Melbourne it's been quite a big event, really. We've had a report, as we mentioned earlier, Professor Hamilton was part of the trial report group, the chair of the group, that recommended a second room. But in terms of nursing, this has been a big change, big swing to harm reduction. And it's also had a big cohort of nurses who all of a sudden have become drug and alcohol nurses, whether they like it or not. So they've been employed from places like emergency, or other areas of nursing, community nursing, wherever it might be. They're working in a drug and alcohol area. So it's a big change for us as a workforce, these kind of facilities and these initiatives. Those who have been around in drug and alcohol for a while will really relate to this first comment here, that it's a diverse system. And several people have used this word piecemeal that I've got here in inverted commas. Regardless of where you go, it's very, very different. Every state in Australia is different. New Zealand is different. You know, we have a very diverse system. It's also been through quite a few sector reforms, and in Victoria, lots of nurses who've been around for a while will speak to this quite well in terms of what sector reform has meant for them. But on a positive note, there has been an increase in nurse-specific roles. Consultation liaison is the big one. Drug and alcohol nurses in mental health. We've seen drug and alcohol nurses move into areas such as mental health, emergency departments, lots of awareness of dual diagnosis, hospital admission risk programs, community teams. There's been a big increase in the awareness and use of drug and alcohol, the burden of drug and alcohol use, problematic drug and alcohol use, and nurses in their role in treating this. Seeing an aging cohort, and again, anyone who works in drug and alcohol will attest to this, lots of physical and mental health comorbidity. Our patients, clients, consumers are by and large big carriers of comorbidity in terms of physical and mental health. We've also seen ongoing success of needle and syringe programs, which have been around for quite some time and have really combated bloodborne viruses and the impact of those. So extended lifespans of people who historically we might have said, you know, would be old at 50, but are moving into older age, so to speak. Emerging hepatitis C treatment is contributing to this at the moment as well. As Professor Hamilton mentioned, we're seeing an awareness of problematic alcohol and other drug use in older adults as well. And we also plan to launch this, finish this around that dreaded C word, COVID-19, and the lockdowns that we saw, the panic really that we saw around March, April, all across Australia, which this last point here really pushed the introduction of the depot buprenorphine, long-acting injectables. So this has been something that's really come screaming into drug and alcohol practice at the moment, this introduction of depot, particularly in response to physical distancing, being able to see consumers and the like. So the aim of our project, we recognise that there are a lot of things going on that were changing the contemporary face of drug and alcohol nursing. It was really to map the alcohol and other drug nursing workforce. And again, this conversation between Darren and I was really about just basically providing a map of where drug and alcohol nurses were. The more we went on, like these projects tends to happen, the more we wanted to find out not just locations, but demographics, qualifications, experience, age, gender, setting, where people were working, all of those kind of things. We also wanted to have a look at some issues from a high-level perspective. So it was really important to us to put a qualitative voice into the project. We also decided that we're going to have a look at employment opportunities for nurses in the area. Again, these things kind of come out of what you've observed over time in the specialty. And we did notice that employment could be quite variable, as I'll talk about shortly. There was lots of jobs that couldn't be filled, people couldn't find jobs, so we really wanted to look at that as well. But the last point here, we really wanted to look at the perspective of nurses working in the area, get their voice, what they did, what their work was like, what was changing about their work, their voice on the issues facing their work area, the overall workforce, and a little bit about what the barriers to entry to the profession were, and career progression, of course, for them, if there was any barriers to that. So we conducted this in 3 phases. The first phase looked at what was out there, the grey literature, and there's not a lot really. It's quite variable. There is a lot that's been done on the overall drug and alcohol workforce. And CEDA, our National Centre, have done a lot on the workforce itself. There's not a lot at all that's specific to nurses. So really we make up demographic numbers in that kind of work, but there's been no work that's really focused on us solely. To look at the employment, we went through Seek. Seek holding the biggest market share at the time, even though that's probably changed if you looked over the past 6 months or so. I'm sure there's other advertisement search engines that have come up. We had a look at that over a 12-month period, and we also spoke to some key informants, 10 of them who were selected by the Dana Management Committee, people who'd been around for a while, had seen the way the workforce had changed, had been involved in things, you know, considered of higher standing, like key informants usually are due to their experience or their role in the workforce. Second phase, we launched a survey. Those who joined us in 2019 at the conference, which feels like so long ago, will know that we launched that there. It was a Qualtrics survey. We used snowball sampling. We asked you all to go and promote this to your networks and get all your colleagues to fill it out. We used a lot of targeted social media advertising as well. We went through industry contacts and, you know, disseminated the survey that way. For an end result of 349. Wasn't as great in New Zealand. We only had 12 New Zealanders participate, but in Australia we had 337, which was a little bit beyond what we needed. So it was a very good result. And again, I take my hat off to those of you that gave up your time to do this. And our third phase, we interviewed 40 drug and alcohol nurses across Australia and New Zealand. There was an option to participate in these through the survey. And our independent research assistant then contacted and went through a brief telephone interview of about 30 minutes duration. In terms of demographics, it looks promising there because we've had growth up to 2018, and these are the latest APRA statistics that when you register as a nurse, you provide your primary work area. 2019, we had 2,123, so it does look promising. We're a small specialty, but we do have some growth, which is really quite encouraging. Be interesting to go back and look at this after COVID lockdowns, because we did find this in our COVID work that there were quite a few older experienced nurses who stopped working basically because of so-called risks to their health, and there was some concern anecdotally, because it's a qualitative piece of work that we did over COVID, that they wouldn't be coming back. So I think it does need some revisiting. On the right here you can see our map of where we're located. Again, quite promising that you can see quite a few rural and remote. Again, as Professor Hamilton mentioned, it was more difficult to recruit those people in rural and remote areas. So this is probably something we need to look at going forward. In terms of the advertised roles on the left, Australia, we saw 244 over that 12-month period. By and large, they were full-time, a few part-time ones, a handful of casual. In New Zealand, they were mostly full-time, only 58 advertised there though. Most of those, or not most, sorry, 18% of those were advanced practice roles, CNS, clinical nurse specialist, clinical nurse consultant, nurse practitioner in Australia. So quite promising in terms of higher levels of our specialty. These bottom two figures here are a bit more concerning. So open to others was where we undertook a process looking at these advertisements, which we'd consider to be largely nursing roles, but were open to other allied health professionals or the generic AOD worker that we see popping up in job advertisements. Nearly a quarter in Australia, the majority in New Zealand, nearly 60% open to others, which is quite concerning and probably needs a little bit more investigation in itself, which we'll talk about at the end. These roles, I've taken these straight out of the report. So if you want to look up the report and can look at these figures, the figure numbers are right there. In Australia, they were largely community. In New Zealand, largely inpatient, probably reflecting the differences in our specialty. Again, this piecemeal, nothing's the same across drug and alcohol nursing. I certainly discovered doing this work. A few sneaky advertisements didn't really specify where the roles were. The second, not clearly specified there, but by and large, community, the more traditional roles, inpatient, OSD clinics were represented there as well. And moving on to our key informants. So we spoke to our key informants, the 10 of them that talked about, we had a semi-structured questionnaire, which was really driven by the literature review and the management committee concerns. This was viewed by the management committee in terms of whether it was appropriate to ask these people what we wanted to know, and then rolled out to speak to our key informants. The erosion of the alcohol and other drug nursing role was the big one. And there was this idea that we were priced out. Second comment there, the non-nurse clinicians to provide clinical care because nurse clinicians were seen as inflexible, clinical and expensive. And this is certainly something that rattles around, particularly non-government organisations, the cost of hiring registered nurses in areas. If we're hired on our state EBA, we cost a fair bit of money, and nurses generally won't go for anything below that EBA. So there's quite a significant difference. This is what we're hearing from NGOs around Australia. We also heard that a few funded nursing roles weren't being replaced, which was a bit of a worry. Someone would go on leave, maternity leave, or they'd leave for another position, long service leave, whatever it might be. 6 months later, that role wasn't filled. Whether that was, it was actually a bit of a split between whether they could find suitable candidates or whether it was due to a reluctance almost to fill the role, a bit of disorganisation, I suppose, as well, advertising, that kind of thing, getting approval for it. There was a lot of stigma attached to the role. Lots of people spoke about picking up the stigma that clients experience, consumers experience. There was also this idea of accidental entrance, as I've put here. So, you know, you've come across because you've hurt your back or you don't want to work shift work and someone's told you that drug and alcohol work is an easier road, whatever it might be. This is really how it was framed throughout the key informant themes and also in the 40 interviews that we did. The stigma really was related. There was lots of talk about addiction as a moral failing or a choice. You know, lots of really great, I could have covered this slide in comments about this. You know, we don't say to people, one of them really stood out to me. We don't say to people, oh, you've relapsed with MS, you naughty thing. I thought that was a really great comment because it just shows that we really kind of look down on people that seek drug and alcohol treatment, which was really came through strongly in these interviews. And I think this was a really good comment as well, this final one here. If we can't articulate what we do and the importance of it, then how the hell does anybody know what we do? And that was a big comment throughout the interviews as well, both the first and the last phase. We really needed to do more work on promoting a role. We were seeing an aging workforce, which I'll cover very shortly. One of these fantastic comments that you saw in the animation back there, a bank of knowledge that's approaching retirement, and we're not seeing that many come through. Also, this idea of a recruitment paradox as well, where yes, we need graduate nurses, we need people to come into our specialty, but we want them to be able to have you know, years of experience in medical, ICU, emergency, mental health, whatever it might be, because we need them to manage all these comorbidities that we're seeing. So we're a bit of our own worst enemy there, and that probably needs a bit of work down the track. There was lots of talk around the move to generic roles, meaning that the essence of drug and alcohol nursing was lost. This was around complex pharmacotherapy. A few key informants said that lots of nurses didn't know how to manage this, didn't know how to really work in systems where complex pharmacotherapy was provided. And also, as echoed through the recruitment paradox, there needed to be greater knowledge of physical comorbidities, things associated with aging. We know our cohort are very complex and don't just come to us with a drug and alcohol issue. There's always a lot of psychosocial, physical and mental health comorbidities attached. There was limited undergraduate education. This is a great comment here. I obviously work at a university, so I can't put it down to every university because I don't know what's out there. I'm hoping there's a few that actually educate undergraduate nurses as well in drug and alcohol. The universities have failed miserably in terms of educating staff on drug and alcohol issues. Those who got drug and alcohol content through the key informants, through the last phase of the interviews, really said that this shaped their career, and there's some great literature out there that informs that as well, and says that students who have a good AOD placement tend to be interested and look for the profession, look to come to the profession and the specialty. In terms of workforce development, there were mixed opportunities to engage in professional development, lots of comments around time. We don't have time to do it, it costs money, you know, we don't get time off our work setting, away from our work setting to do it. There was diverse entry. Again, this came back to those accidental entrants, people stumbling into drug and alcohol and haven't left. This was very mixed as well. People were very open throughout both phases in saying, I came to drug and alcohol because I wanted to change from shift work, but I was really interested in it, loved it, haven't left. And of course, there was some comment on some who, questions about whether it was appropriate. They'd been there for that long. They felt like they were burnt out. They felt like, you know, it was really the last stop on their nursing career. And some areas describe great programs for graduate nurses, others not so fantastic tended to be pretty region dependent. And our second phase was the survey. I've just shown Australia after the map here because, again, we only had 12 responses from New Zealand. So it's a bit of a limitation when we're looking at the New Zealand data. But our survey responses were pretty close to what we saw on the APRA map, even though it would have been great to get some more rural and remote nurses. I have a feeling that this group are probably more engaged with primary health networks, which is a work in progress and something we plan to do next year. On the right here, you can see we got 309 answers in terms of their qualification. 67%, as you saw in the animation, had a higher level degree, postgraduate degree, so highly experienced workforce. Lots with master's degrees as well. Only about 40% though in Australia saying that they were drug and alcohol related, these postgraduate qualifications. So there was quite a wide mix of postgraduate. This is just another representation of their fantastic map that fell over and turned into an aeroplane. That was actually Darren's suggestion. And as soon as he said it, I went, that's great, because it really does show what we're facing here. This is this looming kind of group that are coming to retirement with not enough coming to replace them, basically, which is the crux of workforce sustainability. Reported work settings really mirror what we saw in the advertisements. Lots of community work, lots of pharmacotherapy clinics, detox units, what you consider traditional drug and alcohol nursing areas to work in, really kind of across the board. And it was quite surprising, some of the areas that people worked in, as I'll talk about shortly. By and large, mostly people describe themselves as nurses, staff nurses, clinicians, whatever that may be. Again, we had some higher level clinical nurse, consultant, advanced practice, nurse practitioners. We're fortunate to speak to a number of nurse practitioners through this, which was great, and added another dimension to this in terms of advanced practice in the specialty. And with this, you always start to wonder whether this is this age distribution is because Dana members are older. Interestingly, we're doing some statistics on those who did answer that were Dana members, and yes, they tended to have more experience in the specialty, but doing some correlation analysis, which we've had to do several times because it just didn't make sense at first. They were less likely to have those postgraduate qualifications, but had been around longer, the older nurses, which probably makes sense if we think about the way nursing has gone. It's now very much all about specialising and going out and getting postgraduate specialty qualifications, whereas it might not have been in the past. This is from APRA, and you can see this over time from 2013 to 2018. Latest data again, 2019 is actually the latest, but kind of predated when we got the last lot of data. It has come out now, but not included on here. And you can see that there's a promising growth in the 20 to 34 age bracket in 2018, which is kind of matched by almost a doubling, well, it is effectively a doubling from 2013 to 2018 of nurses aged 65 to 74. Again, quite concerning, and this is one of our recommendations that we look at this group working beyond what we consider the traditional retirement age, and not just looking at it and saying, well, you know, they're taking places for younger nurses, but looking and saying, what are they taking when they retire? Lots of experience, probably a really fantastic mentoring resource that we need to tap into before they do retire. We also asked a number of qualitative questions on the survey, which we got quite a good number of responses for. And this is one I just wanted to highlight. We did ask people what they thought were the attributes necessary for being an AOD nurse. And you can see at the top here, top three, well, top two by far were non-judgmental approach and empathy. And I really highlighted this because I just wanted to sell or underscore, I suppose, what Margaret Hamilton was saying there around undergraduate education. Anyone who teaches undergraduate nurses will know that these soft skills are really hard to teach, really hard to sell, can be a lot about babies and machines that go bing in an undergraduate nursing degree. So if these are our top attributes that we need, how do we teach them? Again, there's been some really interesting work done around non-judgmental approaches and empathy out in the research world, but I think we really need to work on this and how we teach these. And finally, again, this is just a bit of a whistle stop tour. So as I mentioned before, the report will be up. Feel free to download it and have a read. That would be fantastic. These are the themes that we got from the 40 interviews that we did in the final phase. They really fell into 4 key categories: workforce, recruitment, clients, consumers, patients, and the preparation needed to work in the field. And just to kind of give you an overview without going into these comprehensively, role diversity was a big one, and everyone explained what they did. It was the first question we had on our semi-structured guide: where do you work, what do you do? And I was blown away by the diversity of work. We had people who were working in amazing roles across the entire healthcare spectrum. Lots of midwives as well, working in substance use in parenting programs that associated more strongly with a drug and alcohol nursing position. Lots working across the community, emergency, mental health, in addition to those working in the more traditional areas, such as pharmacotherapy clinics. Again, the aging workforce is a big issue. Lots of conversation around this, lots of observation. And again, moving forward, we did 19 interviews on COVID, and this was echoed again. I don't know if, you know, so-and-so will come back because they're in their 60s, they're considered high risk. I haven't seen them in a month. I don't know what's going to happen. So this is a big threat to our workforce sustainability at the moment. As you can see here, there's lots of comments here. The middle one stands out pretty well. I've got nobody to replace me. And we heard this a fair bit. Where are these grads coming from? Where are these new people coming from? The opportunities as well in that third point, people have to wait till they step out of this position so they can step up and advance their careers. This was particularly true around what we consider those advanced practice positions, CNC, CNS, nurse practitioner. It was a bit of a worry in terms of people having opportunity. There was a lot of talk around there being a deficit of recognition around drug and alcohol nursing, professional identity. What is it? How do we promote it? How can we make it a credible career choice? We had lots of talk around how do we compete with things like pediatrics, cancer nursing, the example here, the pinnacle of nursing, so to speak. How do we make drug and alcohol nursing that respected? Fed into the attractiveness of the specialty. I really like this comment. A lot of people saying you'll hate it, don't go there. It's those awful people you have to work with. It really feeds into that stigma that we then experience as nurses. In the key informant interview, someone had said, you know, I went to a national nursing event and was asked when I was going to be a real nurse again. And I think that's a pretty powerful statement in terms of how we're viewed in a lot of areas of nursing. Lots of talk around a need to promote the role better. We didn't promote it that well. We needed to get out there and promote it better. And again, this mirrors what was mentioned in the key informant interviews. And again, there's lots of research around this. Clinical placements in drug and alcohol, successful clinical placements end up with graduates who want to come and work for us, become drug and alcohol nurses. There was lots of talk again around the skill set, what we needed in terms of mental and physical health, psychosocial issues, AOD use, and, you know, this idea that nursing was about fixing things and drug and alcohol nursing was the complete opposite to that. This quote, I think, sums that up. I guess you have to sit quietly in an uncomfortable space. Again, lots of talk around whether lots of nurses could actually do that. It's hard to recruit, succession planning. What are we going to do? How do we future-proof? This is the big question, isn't it? How do we future-proof drug and alcohol nursing? In terms of our clients, increasing complexity, aging, years of drug use, people getting treatments they might not have got in the past through extending lifespans. Again, lots of research around about this, but at the coalface, nurses are dealing with this. We're the ones that have to have the skill to manage complexity and advocate for our patients, particularly physical comorbidity, advocating to get our patients treated, our consumers treated, our clients treated. Dual diagnosis was mentioned as well. People talked about encountering mental ill health and how important it was to treat this, but there was also a recognition, and this really goes to the integration of services, which I haven't included here, but there was a lot of talk about this, mental health and drug and alcohol, areas that have done this. Big recognition that people with mental ill health presenting to drug and alcohol service wouldn't necessarily be seen by a mental health service. The mental ill health profile of these consumers was a lot different than what you'd see in a mental health service. We are doing a little bit of work on that as well to explore that a little bit more. And stigma, I think I've mentioned that extensively. In the interests of time, I'll move on from that. But this comment down the bottom, the only group of patients that you're actually allowed to discriminate against, or so it seems to us, is quite a powerful statement on how our consumers are seen in the wider nursing world. Talked about the recruitment paradox, this idea that we want grads, but we send them away to get more experience. Hopefully they come back to us in a few years when they've got that. I suspect that that may not be happening. We want them to have some experience around physical health assessments, ICU, emergency. Big question is, how do we get that without sending graduates away? And I talked a bit about the accidental entrance. I slid in sideways. I don't know of many nurses who started saying, I want to do drug and alcohol. I'll put my hand up and say, I'm one of them. I started in mental health and stumbled across a DANA conference because I was working with so many people with dual diagnosis and kind of went, I really like these people. This is where I belong. They understand what I'm talking about. So our recommendations, which are discussed in a lot of detail in the report, are to improve advocacy for AOD nursing. The first there, get the nursing voice out there. We're doing a lot of work around this and I really want to talk about it, but it's all in progress. So look for it in a future DANA e-blast. We really need to promote drug and alcohol nursing as a specialty to graduates and new entrants, and obviously get it into undergraduate nursing degrees. That idea of the recruitment paradox, how do we bring people to us and provide them with the skills without sending them off to go and learn? It's really important that we do grab these people where we can, where they're interested. We need to look at our aging cohort. Again, an excellent group of mentors that we should be tapping into as a resource before they go and retire. Looking at nurse practitioner models of care, something that we've started on and hopefully we'll be able to share with you early in the new year. Done a bit of work around this, looking at nurse practitioner models of care as an extension of this project. We need to promote the role of our role, drug and alcohol nurses, to the wider world of nursing. We're working in a lot of areas. This project is showing this. We really need to promote and improve our understanding of what we actually do. Integration was the one I spoke about, where mental health services and drug and alcohol are coming together. We really need to retain our identity. It would be great to discuss this in more detail, but there is some work coming out around this, I'll just say that. And also look at some potential loss of drug and alcohol nursing roles. And that is it for me. I'll try not to blow up the Zoom this time. There we go. And I'll hand back to Darren.
Thank you. That was great. And I would encourage people to access the DANA website if they want to read the full report, which is fantastic. But what I'd like to say, from DANA, me and the AOD nursing workforce, I think thank you so much for your time and expertise in compiling this research in your own time, Adam. It has really put us as a specialty workforce on the map. It's an invaluable and hopefully will inform universities, state and federal departments in their future planning. I suppose one question I would have for you before you wrap up is, what other research is DANA currently involved in, if you don't mind?
Again, that was a really quick overview. I didn't realize that it was such a big project, but it's really hard to explain it in 20 minutes or less. So there's a bit of work coming out from it. We went off and looked at nurse practitioner models of care. So that's a work in progress at the moment. We did a few interviews and survey with that as well. I'm in the process of writing that up now, and we're hoping to have that out come January. But obviously there's a lot of work that needs to come out of this. Again, we're involved in a number of groups that are consulting and advocating. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, and it should all start coming out in our e-blast shortly. Obviously, we need to work out how to promote our specialty, how to get new entrants, graduates into our specialty. I think, we'll argue till we're blue in the face for undergraduate education. It tends to be down to academics' interests as to whether it's included in content. So there is a lot of work. The report goes into a lot of detail in terms of what needs to be done.
Thank you. That was great. I'll hand it back to you if you want to close it off. And thank you everybody for attending.